What's going on, guys? No Life Ols here, coming at you with another video. For those of you who are new to this channel, I'm Oliver, a biomedical science graduate from Australia, and in today's video I'm going to be telling you how I managed to improve my GPA from a 2.8 in my first semester to finishing off my degree with a 3.9 cumulative GPA. Let's get into the video. My first tip actually goes out to those of you who are watching who are transitioning from high school to university. There's a key factor that you have to keep in mind when you're doing this transition is that university is a very different environment to high school. Rather than being spoon-fed all the information like you are in high school,
nice.
University is really dependent on independent learning. The integral difference is that you have to create your own motivation, and a way that I like to create motivation is by making goals. If you set goals, it'll prevent you from remaining stagnant in your progression. It will allow you to swim in a river that can't be swam in. If you don't make goals, you're going to drown in a river that can't be swam in. But if you make goals, it'll direct you and give you purpose on what you want to become. And that's really the key to making a goal, is it's going to motivate you to survive or improve your life. I actually do this myself. I make goals all the time. One in particular was the goal to improve my GPA. After my first semester of getting a 2.8, I really wanted to improve myself because I knew that I could, but I just needed motivation, and therefore I made goals. In fact, I made a goal on my wall. It's kind of weird, but you know, it works. It's literally jotting down a goal on a piece of paper.
Okay.
I framed my piece of paper so that every day when I wake up, I have to look at this goal, and it motivates me to work my hardest.
Some people dream of success while you're gonna wake up and work hard at it. Nothing is impossible.
It's literally a piece of paper. This is where the clutch is, boys. You just gotta write down your goals. And it says that I wanted to obtain at least a 3.9 GPA by the time I finished my degree, which not only did I manage to obtain, but I actually managed to exceed it, which is something that can happen as it manifests because you're motivated to work towards attaining the goal. This is something that worked for me, and I'm sure that it will work for a lot of you guys. I'm gonna put the camera down because I'm starting to get vertigo walking around like a spastic. My next tip goes to those of you who have already started university and are into the game. University is just another game. That's how I like to see it. Now, when you're in the game, you have to make sure that you're playing the game right. You can't just go into university willy-nilly and just think that you're gonna fucking dominate the game. There's a strategy to every game, and you have to think of it like that. You have to think of university as if it's a game and there's a strategy to win the game.
Stop it.
You can't just go into lectures and expect to learn everything in the lecture. That's a very poor and unproductive way of studying or even learning. What you really want to do is, before you even go to your lectures, you want to break up all your subjects into all the different assessments that you have and all the different topics that you want to learn. Write them down physically. This will basically prime your brain into preparing itself to learn productively for all these topics. Don't expect to go to your lecture and write down notes and listen simultaneously. That's not how the brain works, or at least that's not how it works for me from my experiences. You're never going to be able to write notes and actively learn from the lecturer simultaneously. In my first semester of university, I literally rocked up to the lecture and I was like, alright, sweet, what are we learning today? How ignorant was I to do so? From the time the lecture started to the time it finished in my first lecture, I was like, whoa. That was way too much information. I could not possibly take in all of that information actively while taking notes. What you have to do is, you have to break it up. You have to take some time out to be productive and learn as much as possible in a short period of time. The first thing you have to do is, you have to pre-read content. Pre-read the information that the lecturer either gives you, or pre-read content about the topic that you're about to learn in the lecture. What this does is, it primes your brain and prepares it for learning a certain topic. And so when you get into the lecture, instead of learning this new topic that's very foreign to you, you're now just filling in gaps and consolidating your knowledge and your understanding of what the lecture is about. In your lecture, write down key notes about the lecture. Write down key notes that the lecturer tells you to write down. Don't try and write everything in the lecture slides. You'll have access to the lecture slides. You have to break it up. You're in the lecture to consolidate the information that you learned during your pre-reading. That's how you learn. You don't learn in the lecture directly for the first time. Then what you have to do is, after the lecture's finished, you have to go and take some time out, whether it be, you know, directly after or a short period after. It can't be too far after, because then you would have forgotten everything that you learned. You have to then use your consolidated understanding of what you've learned in your lecture, and you write it into the physical world. You write it in your notes. So when you write your notes, you're basically using the lecture slides because that's the syllabus, and then you're expanding on everything in the lecture slides in order for you to have a comprehensive understanding of what the topics are that you're being taught. If you do this right, you'll have a concise set of notes that will really help you to study in your exams and even for your assignments, so you can refer back to your notes when you forget certain topics. The next strategy of the game is a very physical one. It's when you go to your lectures, make sure you always sit in the front row. There are tremendous benefits from sitting in the front row. Firstly, it makes you actively listen more because someone's watching you. The lecturer is going to be right at the front of the room, and if you talk or get distracted in any way besides your laptop, try not to get distracted by your laptop, but if you talk, the lecturer is going to stop and be like,
You need to shut the fuck up.
Anyway, the next one is that when you sit in the front row, you're basically holding yourself accountable. And what do I mean by that? It's that when you have a lecturer, they're often going to notice the students who sit in the front. And when you don't rock up because you're at home chilling, they're going to notice, and it's going to make you self-conscious, and that's going to hold you accountable for your actions when you don't do well.
Get your shit together. Get it all together and put it in a backpack. All your shit, so it's together.
So when you sit in the front row, you're not only getting a better experience in the lecture itself, but you're actually holding yourself accountable for your actions when you decide to slack off. The next strategy I would recommend in order to improve your scores is by going to your lectures. By going to your lectures, it'll give you the chance to actively ask questions. It can often be intimidating to put your hand up or to ask a clarifying question in a lecture theatre, especially when there's a lot of people in the lecture theatre with you. But what I'm saying is if you ask clarifying questions when you're not sure about something, rather than going home and forgetting about what you needed clarification with, you'll be able to write down the clarification and the answer to what you didn't understand, so that when you go home to make your lecture notes after your lecture, you'll be able to write it down concisely without having any hesitation or being unproductive about what you don't know, because you now know it. When I was in uni, man, I asked so many questions. Not like stupid questions that are on the slide or are being answered. Even though they say there's no such thing as stupid questions, there definitely is.
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
Don't ask the question if the answer is known or can be searched. Only ask questions when there's a discrepancy in the way that it was presented. Because often enough, when you find something confusing that the lecturer says, there are a lot of students around you who would want to ask questions but don't have the courage to do so. So by asking questions, are you not only improving your own lecture notes and productivity, but you're also helping out your colleagues, which is something that you should really do. The next thing that you're going to want to do is that you want to divide up your social time to your study time.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
These two things are different and they cannot be mixed together. There's often times where people will be like, hey yo, you want to come to the library with me and study? No, that's not productive. Well, at least it's not often productive unless it's a group assignment. But other than that, you often should just be studying by yourself. Anything that can distract you should be taken away, which includes friends, phones, anything else. Get rid of it and just focus on your study. When you go to study, only study. Don't do anything else. And there's another thing in that. It's that when you study, create a familiar area where you only go to study. And what do I mean by that? It's like saying, I have an office where whenever I go into that office, I study. I don't do anything else in the office. It's to build a context in your brain that when you go to that room, it triggers you and puts you in that mindset that you need to learn. The next tip's a bit of a tricky one because it takes a lot of trial and error, and often you won't be able to discover it in your first semester of university. Find out what type of learner you are. Are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Unfortunately for me, I'm the type of person who literally has to write it down 1,000 times. That's a very unproductive way of studying, and there's a lot of other ways which you can study which are more productive. But that's just what works for me, and I have the time to do it. But often so people can be a combination of a few. But what I recommend that you do is just try out all the different types of learning. Look up the different types of learning and try the different types of learning out. That way you can be more productive when you study and spend less time studying and more time chilling. The next one's a little bit harsh. And that's because it's something that you have to reflect on as a person. You have to ask yourself why you're doing a degree. It reflects back to the first tip that I gave you. You have to create that motivation and understand why you're actually doing it. When you understand why you're doing something, it'll give you a lot more direction, right? But in saying that, in order to attain that goal, you have to be persistent and you have to be committed. If you're not committed, then you're not going to achieve your goal. And so what do I mean by committed? Committed means you have to spend a lot more time doing the things that you don't like studying, instead of the things that you do like.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
And I'm not saying to just block out everything that you do like in your life. That's a horrible way of living. You're going to be depressed and you're probably going to drop out eventually. But what I'm saying to do is have some type of balance, first of all. And when you have that balance, you have to make sure that it's balanced in favor of studying. That way, there's literally no excuse for you not to do well, because you've put in all the effort possible. All the spare time that you had, you spent doing something to improve your academic grades. And it's not too much to ask. It's usually only 12-week blocks. Stay committed for those 12 weeks and go absolutely hard. Sometimes during my undergraduate studies, I would spend 12 to 14 hours studying during the day.
What?
If it means that you have to study on weekends, so be it. If it means you have to give up some hours on your part-time job, so be it. If it means that you have to stop hanging out with your girlfriend, so be it. I did most of these things. I spent all weekend studying. I didn't really hang out with my girlfriend that much, unfortunately. I gave up a part-time gig, but I did it because I'm committed to attaining my goal. It's something that I prioritized in my life that I wanted to achieve. The last thing that I would recommend is do an additional year of study. Try and do an honors year or some type of research project.
Just stop.
And if you do well in this research project by implementing the strategies that I've given you, you will definitely improve your GPA drastically. I managed to improve my GPA drastically because I did an honors year of medical research in immunology. And while it was tough, I was able to maintain motivation, stay committed to my goal, and eventually manifest my goal into reality. Just please keep this in mind. You only have to implement these things for 12 weeks at a time, or whatever the semester block is. Just implement it for those weeks dedicated to the semester. And I'm telling you right now that if you stay committed, motivated, and focused, you will drastically improve your GPA. Anyway guys, with that being said, I hope you liked this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so that you get notifications when I post videos. Also make sure you leave some comments and suggestions and I'll read them and reply to them. Until next time guys, thanks for joining No Life Ols here in another video. Stay motivated.
Should fuck her in the Benz.